All right, good morning, everyone. We're starting up right now. Just a couple things as we get going. Everyone should literally seconds ago have gotten an invite from me to a private YouTube video. Yesterday morning, I sat down and I redid your Hot 3 test from scratch. It's about 2.5 hours long. I really took my time and tried to walk through everything that I was doing during the video. All right. If by the end of class today you don't get an invite, just send me an email, but everyone should get one. All right. Okay. The other thing I wanted to mention is if you're having problems, and I know there's going to be one or two students in here who thinks, oh, he's talking about me. I'm talking about everyone. If you have problems working with my volume up there, if you have problems working on anything, for example, if you have had problems with the chapters 8 and 9 homework, please do not wait until Sunday evening to get a hold of me and let me know, because this has happened on more than one occasion with more than one person. All right. And I'm not trying to be cruel here. The faster that you can get to me when you have problems, hopefully the faster I can get to that and try to rectify, and go over whatever the problem is. And I'm going to tell you right now, and I'm not just saying this, I'm not trying to scare anyone in here, but it's going to get harder. All right. Now, you very well may find that what we're going to do this week, chapters 9, 10, and 11, probably you're going to find those were easier than 8, 7, and 8 were. You're probably going to find that. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But I'll tell you, in a week or so, probably a little more than a week, when we start on chapter 12, it gets hard. I think chapters 12 through 16 are the hardest in the book. And then we get to 17 and 18, they're not real bad. Then we get to 19 to 22, and they're kind of in between. There will be things that we go through for the rest of this semester that, at times at least, are going to confuse you, madden you, frustrate you, or whatever. That's why I've really tried to make sure that with some of the homework, we do them together. All right. Okay. So with all that, as it says right here, today, I plan on going over chapter 9 nice and slow. And we'll see where we are time wise. And if there's time, we'll go over chapter 11 as well. All right. Now you might say, well, what about 10? We'll do that tomorrow. All right. Wednesday, as it says, we will distribute, take, and go over the chapters 9 through 11 pretest. What I think I'm going to do this week is I'm not going to give you a test. In other words, Thursday, we'll plan on Thursday being just a lab day. So if people do need time, a whole day dedicated to sitting there and doing homework, you'll have that. I'll still be online. All right. I will still be online from 8 o'clock until usually I'm on till 3:30 or quarter to 4. So if you have questions, you'll be able to, email me and ask me. All right. So that'll be the schedule. Like I said, the plan right now, Thursday will just be a lab day. All right. And then will you take your test next Monday or Tuesday? Let's just see how it goes by the end of the week. All right. Now, your chapter 7 and 8 homework, many people contacted me Saturday and yesterday saying they had problems, couldn't get it done for whatever reason. So I'm going to extend that so that it's due by midnight tonight. All right. So even if you've turned it in already, if you think, well, I turned it in, but I didn't totally finish it, then, go back and finish it, turn it in by midnight tonight. What that means is I'm going to start grading them tomorrow morning. Normally, I would have started grading them today, but like I said, when you get a third to a half the class who are telling you I'm behind, etc., I'm giving you another day. Now, again, that's another reason that I'm dedicating Thursday as a lab day, because the chapters 9, 10, and 11 written tests and homework will be due by Sunday. Now, for chapter 11, there's no homework and there's no labs on this. So you will have 3 written tests, a written test for 9, a written test for 10, and a written test for 11. All right. Plus, let me go over here. So for 9, 10, and 11, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 problems. Have not looked at them yet. All right. But we will do some of those 5, probably 2 of them, probably 1 from chapter 9, and probably 1 from chapter 10 as a class. We'll see how it goes. All right. So with that said, and again, you've seen this already, but we just jump back. So that's 273. So the idea this week is we're going to get through chapter 9, how to work with dates and strings. Chapter 10, more skills for working with Windows forms and controls. Chapter 11, how to debug an app. I will tell you, with the payroll program that we've been working on, I've updated it over the weekend. I wrote 3 more payroll apps. We'll start talking about them today, and we will talk about them some more tomorrow. Not only that, there will be material in chapter 9. There will be material in chapter 10 we've already talked about. Things like how to use a message box, how to set the tab order with view tab order. I decided to bring that stuff up earlier in the semester because I thought everybody could handle that. So when we get to those things, I'm not going to spend much time on them because we already have. All right. So with that said, let's jump into chapter 9. Okay. Now, one of the things that I did, all right, in fact, let me just bring it up here and show you. I don't remember yet if I've updated the repo or not. So I'm just going to bring this up, but I made it in a copy. I thought maybe we would do it as a class, but some of these programs are getting pretty long. I think the last one was over 500 lines. Yeah, that is pretty long. But if we look, let me bring this one up. I think this is the one I want to show you. Okay, so if you look in here, this is, I don't think I did it in this one yet, did I? Yes, I did. Okay. So if we look at this one, if we run this, and don't worry if you don't, I just want to show you something. That's all right now. So don't worry if it doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you look in here, it's still a payroll lookup program. And if I put this in there, now what you'll notice is I've added a new array of dates. This is the date the person started. And based on the date the person started, this is how many years of service they have put in. How did I figure that out? I didn't. I went and Googled it. All right. So there are things in here that are good for this program. There are still things that have to be changed, etc. But that's basically in here. That's kind of what I wanted to get to today. Then when we come in tomorrow and we look at this and I bring up the latest iteration, which is iteration 7, you can see it's even bigger. So when we bring that one up tomorrow, and I bring this up and I put in the same employee, you'll notice what happens. All right. So today we're going to talk more about dates and we're going to talk about strings and the like. Tomorrow we're going to talk about some extra controls, such as this right here is a group box, this box right here. Inside of the group box, I've added 2 radio buttons. In here is what's called the checkbox. In here is what's called a list box. So you can see what we have here as far as adding some additional types of controls. That's what tomorrow we'll talk about. All right, just so you have an idea of where we are, where we're going to, etc. So I believe I wrote like, I don't know if it's 4, 5, 6, and 7 or 5, 6, and 7. I will make sure that I update the payroll GitHub repo by the end of the day today. All right. So with that said, let's jump into the chapter. So you'll notice in here, it says it's broken into two areas: how to work with dates and times and how to work with strings. And then the last thing that's in there is on formatting. All right. There will be a few things that will be in here, such as right at the end of the chapter, they'll talk about how to use interpolation of strings. All right. And I have actually showed you that earlier in the semester, but it hasn't been enforced, so to speak. We're going to really start using that a lot more now, and hopefully you'll see why. But if you look through here, for instance, they're going to talk about parse and triparse. Yeah, we'll spend some time on that, but you've already been using parse and triparse. All right. So I'm going to concentrate harder on the new stuff. Okay. So let's just jump in here. And the first thing is on dates and times. And the thing to realize right there is when you go in and you do something like this, okay? For instance, date time, it is a type of variable, just like we've used int and we've used string and we've used bool, etc. Date time is another type of variable. You'll notice when you use it, the D must be capitalized, the T must be capitalized. All right. Plus, unlike the stuff that we had done earlier in the semester, a date time variable is an object. All right. And what do I mean by that? Notice that when you set it, you can either set it using three things, which is the year, the month, and the day, or you can set it using six things. So you've got the year, the month, the day, the hour, the minute, and the second. If you set it like this with only three things, as shown right there, it defaults to midnight. All right. Also, as you can hopefully see here, it uses military time. So for instance, right now it is about 8:15 a.m. However, if it was 8:15 p.m., instead of being 8:15, it would be 20:15. That kind of an idea. All right. And you'll notice that when you do this, you are able to go in and there's a parse and there's a triparse where to make sure that people have put valid values in there. All right. There are some smarts that are built into this. You're going to see it as we go on. All right. And the only other thing I'll say about what's shown here is you can see on the bottom of the screen right now, you can format a date in a lot of different ways. All right. We're used to here in the United States of using slashes, forward slashes, or dashes. In some other countries, not only do they use other things like periods, but in some other countries, whereas we've got something like this, where we would have the year, then the month, and the day, they might have the year, and then the day, and then the month. It's different when you start talking about what's referred to as internationalization. Again, what I'm saying is different countries format things in different ways. All right. So there's date formats and there's time formats. Okay. So as it says right there, you can use the date time structure to create and work with dates and times. What you're going to notice in a few pages, it might even be in the next page, I don't remember, but there are methods that you can use with dates and times as well. Some of these methods will start with the word get, which means that it's an accessing method. It will show you information. Other ones might start with the word set, which means that you can set information or you can change it. Get get routines are often called accessors, which means that you can access data, but you can't change it. Set routines are often referred to as mutators because they allow you to mutate or change data. All right. So as it says, to create this date time value, you use the new keyword. What that means is when we do this, what we are really creating here, for example, like right there or right there, is we're creating a date time object. All right. And how do we know it's an object? Well, you can see it has multiple pieces. So it's not one of those simple scalar values that we worked with earlier in the semester that held an int or held a double or held a decimal or held a bool, etc. They're not that. They're an object, so they have multiple components. So for instance, again, really a date time object has 6 components: a year, a month, a day, an hour, a minute, and a second. Now, as it says, just like with the scalar variables that we've used, you can use a datetime.parse or a datetime rather, dot triparse. We'll look at that later on in the chapter today. All right. If you omit the time spec, and I mentioned this already, it defaults to midnight time in there. The reason that that can be important is a lot of times when people store date time values into a database, they put, like a hire date, for example, like we'll talk about it in a little bit. All right. Okay. If you were hired today, meaning that you were hired on 6/12/2023, personally, as a hiring manager, I don't care if you were hired at 8 a.m. or 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. I just care about your hired date. All right. So a lot of times what you'll find, especially like in databases, if they do store something as a date time, you'll have a valid date in there and the time on many, most, or maybe even everything will be set to midnight. All right. And if you care, I guess is a little more hardware oriented, but as it says, a date is stored as a 64-bit signed integer that represents the number of ticks that have elapsed since January 1st of the year one. Now, when you think about it, it's got to be a big honking number, and it is. But we don't have to worry about that, how things are stored internally. Okay. So on the next page, as it says, they're going to show you some stuff. Hold on a sec. All right. Good morning. We are just kind of beginning part of chapter 9. And I mentioned too that again, all of you in the class should have gotten a private or a GitHub invite to a private video that I created yesterday where I went over and did the entire Hot 3 test. All right. It's about 2 to 2.5 hours long. Okay. So figure 9.2, as it says, is going to show some of the properties of a daytime structure. Okay. And then they're going to talk about how you can start using some of the methods for formatting. So let's look at those. You'll notice if you want today's date and the current time, you can use the dot now. So again, if I ran and I ran that one right now, if I said date time equal current date time, I'm sorry, date time current date time equals date time dot now, it would give me here 6/12/2023, and it would have like about 8:20 a.m. as the time. All right. If I just do it today, it gives me just the date. And then again, as always, it defaults the time to midnight. All right. Now, these date time methods for formatting, They are probably the most important. If you were a programmer, but let's say that for part of your job, you were required you were given data and you had to massage that data, and based off of the massaging of that data, you had to create reports. Well, then when you worked with dates and time, it may become very important. All right. And again, the way that you learn about this is not to sit there and look at pictures, but create yourself a simple program. It doesn't even matter. It could be a console program. Create something like this, the current date time, and then go out and look at it and basically, do a console.write line 4 times. And one time do the too long date string, then do the too short date string, then do the long time string, and too short time string. These are just like the two string we've been using, but we're working with dates and times with them. All right. So they show you some examples right here, assuming again that today it's not, but assuming that it's Monday, January 30th of this year. So that would be the long date, the short date, the long time, and the short time. All right. Now notice two things on here. First of all, the bottom bullet on this page says the format that's used for a date and a time depends on your computer's regional settings. What does that mean? That means that it's getting the date and it's getting the time from your computer. And it's getting the date and the time based on your computer where you are right now. So if you are in the St. Louis, Missouri area, it would be 8:23 a.m. On the other hand, if you were on the West Coast right now, all right, it would probably be 6:23 a.m. It'd be 2 hours earlier. All right. All right. Now, I mentioned this to you before, but we're going to look at this. There are a lot of built-in date and time functions. In this book, they show you the major ones, but you should know this already. That is, if you go out to learn.microsoft.com and I put in here, for example, C# dates, all right, there's working with dates and times, date functions, etc. This should be your go-to thing if you have if you're confused as to how to use something or whatever. That's usually what I go to. So as it says here, the date-time structure provides a bunch of built-in stuff, properties and methods. All right, just so you know, once we get through chapter 11 and we get into chapter 12 and start talking about object-oriented programming, properties and methods are going to be the main thing we're going to highlight. All right, so let's take a look at some of the examples that they have in here. You'll notice there's a chart. So in other words, sometimes I want the entire date. Sometimes I don't. All right, so you can see what you can run on here and get returned. So once I come in here and create a date time object, if I ask for the date, I get everything. If I ask for the month, I get the current month, etc. I'm not going to run through all these. That should make sense rather to you. Now you'll notice, and you have to run examples because some of this can be a little quirky. What do I mean here? Well, if we take a look, date time, current time equal date time now. Again, they're assuming that's the date and the time. So month will give you 1. All right. Hour would give you 10, etc. Once in a while, I never trust, when it comes down to if I'm writing something, right? If I'm writing something and I'm not sure, well, if the documentation says it's going to do it this way, but I'm still not sure if that's correct or not, I'll write myself a little mini program and verify it on my own. With some of this stuff, and it doesn't appear to be in this language, But I know in other programming languages, when they set the month, rather than it going from 1 to 12, it goes from 0 to 11. All right. And if you're using, for example, the day of the week type of thing, it starts with 0. So 0 is Sunday and 6 is Saturday. All right. And that just has to do with the way that it's implemented with some programming languages. So don't be trustworthy of this stuff. They're showing you examples in here, but if you want to make sure that's what it looks like, write something out and take a look at it, in other words. All right. And they show an example here where you could use, for example, day of week. So day of week dot Saturday, day of week dot Sunday. And they're using that day of week from right here. So again, if you want to know more about these, go out to learn.microsoft.com or to W3 Schools or whatever your favorite C# reference is. All right. Now, kind of neat here with these days in a month, as it says, it returns the days of a specified month and year. All right. So if I ran that days of month and for the year I put 2023 and for the month I put 2, all right, I should get back 28 because there were 28 days this year in February. If I put in days and month 2024 and the month of 2, it should give me 29 because next year is a leap year. It used to be not that long ago that they didn't have anything that was written like an is leap year function. So for that is leap year, if I put in there 2023, it'll return false. If I run the is leap year function, I put in 2024, it will return true. All right, but you used to have to write your own, and it wasn't a big thing. But again, it just as the language matures, they add more and more built-in functionality. All right. Now, when you perform operations on dates and times, there's only a certain number of things that you can do. For instance, you can add to a date, you can subtract from a date, you can compare a couple dates to see if one is greater than the other, less than, or equal to, greater than, or equal to, or not equal to. But as far as your arithmetic operations, addition and subtraction are basically it. You cannot multiply dates. You cannot divide dates. You cannot use modulo on dates, etc. So it's not so much that you're hamstrung, but it just makes sense when you think about it. All right, as far as what you can do. Now, the other thing that they're going to talk about in here is quite often when you use, in fact, most of the time, if not all the time, when you use some of these add methods and subtract methods, you're going to be using what are called time span values. All right. And as it says there, late date time values, time spans are based on a structure defined by .NET. All right. Why is that important? Because sometimes, all right, sometimes the language specifies things. Sometimes basically the underlying language, because C# is part of .NET. .NET makes time span available to basically all .NET languages, those being C#, Visual Basic .NET, and F#. All right. So they will show some examples in here, as it says. The first group of statements shows how some of the add methods work. All right, we'll look at that in just a minute. The second group shows how you can use a time span variable to determine the number of days between two date time values. And again, I will show you that one later when we look at the payroll program. And when you think about it, for example, all right, let's assume that somebody got hired at a company, and let's say they got hired on June 12th, 2000. Today would be their hire date. and it'd have been, it'd be their 23rd anniversary. However, if we did it yesterday and it was June 11th, they do not have 23 years of service. They only have 22. I don't care that it's 22 years, 364 days. All right. But you can see that when you are doing mathematical operations, it depends on how intricate you want to be with this stuff. That's where it becomes important. So here's the basic methods that you have for performing rather operations on dates and times. To my knowledge, let's see. I think that with subtract, there's just the subtract there. I don't think there's a subtract seconds, a subtract minutes, etc. I could be wrong on that. They may even show it in here, but I think subtract is the only one. All right. So why would you maybe even use something like subtract? Well, what if you wanted to figure out somebody's birthday? You could take the current year and you could subtract from it the year they were born, as an example. There's a little tweaking you have to do for the same stuff we mentioned before. I mean, again, it's June, and if you're 21 years old, but your birthday isn't until August, you're 21 years old. Even though, you were born in whatever it would be, 2001 or whatever, and you'll be 22, but you won't be 22 until August. That kind of an idea. Now, where the add minutes or the add days rather are used most often, all right, I would say that, the add days and the add months would probably be the ones that would be used the most. Why? Because with a lot of companies, the way that they set up their policies is they have, for example, either what's called a net 30, a net 60, or a net 90. What that means is, all right, they expect payment within 30 or 60 or 90 days of possibly when something ships. All right. So if I'm a Walmart and I'm getting a bunch of stuff in, I might get an invoice that says it was shipped today, June 12th, and it's got a net 60 on it. So you could figure out exactly to the day by adding to the days, adding 60 there, and it would be approximately then, all right, August 12th. All right, it might be the 11th or the 3rd. It doesn't matter. If I wanted to just add a couple months and say that if it was June 12th, it would be August 12th, I could do the add months as opposed to the add days. All right, I've used both of them in some of my things that I'm working on. The add years, again, I suppose you could do that to add to a person's birth date or hire date or whatever. All right, I've never had the reason to use the add years or the add hours or the add minutes or the add seconds. All right. So all I'm trying to do here is introduce you to some of this stuff. All right. You will be asked to look at some of this on your homework, but I believe, and I will definitely take a look at it, that both on the pretest and the regular test, I don't think there's anything even with dates on there. I could be wrong, but I'll double check that by the end of the week here. All right. So again, you'll notice that some of the examples that are in here are using time spans. And as they mention here on the bottom of the page, a time span value represents a period of time. All right. It just works better internally when you're doing mathematical operations to use a time span value as opposed to a date time value. All right. And as I mentioned, plus, minus, equal, not equal, greater than, or equal to, less than or equal to can all be used to work with date time values. But again, not multiply, not divide, not modulo. All right. That's kind of an intro in there for strings. Okay. Or for dates rather. Now we're going to jump into strings. Now, one of the things we're going to look at in here, you might say to me, wow, we used that on our last test and on some of our homework. It would have been nice if we would have talked about it beforehand. Okay, I'll give you that. But I did mention on the test, I gave you some links for some string methods and the like that you could have taken a look at. All right. So as it says, many programs require that you work with characters within strings. Many things do. And strings are important because, as you've already seen, that if you've got a C# form, everything that you input into text boxes in that form goes into strings. All right. So it's your responsibility to parse or convert those things from strings into whatever. All right. So for example, from a string, do an integer in32 dot parse or a decimal dot parse, or now as we'll start talking about a date time dot parse. All right. So they give you some examples here. I'm not going to sit and read this to you. Here, this is kind of important. When you create a string, you are actually creating a string object from the string class. Also, strings are what are referred to as immutable. What does that mean? That means that if I'm writing a program and I do something like this, I come through here and I write this: string name equals Jeff. What that means is somewhere in the memory of the computer at some address, someplace, I don't know where, I have no control over where it goes, but someplace in there, what will happen is the numerical zeros and ones that make up a J, an E, an F, and an F, they're going to be put in there. So for example, I don't know what a J is. I don't care. But let's just say it was 00000101. If that was a J, then that would be inside of the beginning of the address. Then I would in the next location would be the E, then the F, and then another F. So who cares? Why am I telling you that? Well, imagine in here we had a bunch of program statements. I don't care what they do, but they do a bunch of stuff. Then I get down to the point where I say name equal, and they want my full name like that. The reason I'm telling you this is what happens when this changes to this is it doesn't just find that area in memory and then grab the next three locations and put an R and an E and a Y in there. No, it finds a brand new place in memory. All right. And it puts the 0 and 1 representations of JEFFREY. Then it takes wherever this address is that held this, and it basically kind of puts a marker on it, and it tells the system, hey, this isn't being used anymore. So the next time it comes through and it cleans it up, it'll say, hey, we're not using these 4 different locations in memory anymore. They can be used for something else. All right. So when I say that strings are immutable, that's what I mean. All right. It's not that you can't change the value. Yes, you can. But when you change the value, it'll change the location of where they are. Now, what if you say, well, what if I don't want to do that? For instance, what if I have this? So what if I have, all right, and then I come back in here and I say, that'll work. But again, if later on I come down and do this and I reset this to now the first name, all right, if I do that, that's not going to change this. Okay. If I want to be able to build something and not make it immutable, but make it mutable, where I am able to go in and change it, I don't use a string. I use what's called a string builder. All right. Which I have to eventually convert into a string. And they mention that in here a little bit. All right. Now, when you are working with strings, quite often, and here's the thing on String Builder if you want to read it, but when you work with strings, quite often, one of the most important things that you work on with strings are what are referred to as substrings. And that is basically a string within a string. All right. So, for instance, and I've given this example before, what if I was, what if I literally had the Constitution of the United States? All right. And let's just assume that we want to be totally politically correct. Okay. So, in other words, we want to go in and take every time he is mentioned, we want to change it to they. All right. We could go and search there for every time we found he. All right. We'd probably say something like blank, he blank, because as an example, if I just said search for he, it'll find he is inside of when. There's an he. It's inside of they, for example. All right. But you a lot of times when you are working with strings, okay, you are working with what are referred to as substrings, a string within a string. All right. So as it says, when you create a string, you're actually working with a string object. So again, we're talking about a data structure. We're not talking about a simple data value, even though we use it as though it's a simple data value. That's what we've been doing all semester. All right. So some of the members of the string class are shown on the next page. So let's look. You'll notice if you look here, thought it was in here, maybe it's not, but I actually showed you one of these and we used it for the last in chapters 7 and 8, and that was contains. Contains is a string method. Because something contains something else. All right, but strings, these are some of the things that they have. We won't go over all of them, but let's just go over a couple of them right now. The ones that are the most important, like length. All right. If I wanted, I could double check and make sure that if I had a field called state and they were all supposed to be state abbreviations, I could check the length and make sure it was 2 for each thing that was in there. We could put it in a loop and check all 50 states to make sure that the state name had 2 letters in it. That wouldn't guarantee that there are the correct letters, but it would guarantee that each one had a length of 2. This starts with and ends with, hopefully that just makes sense with what those are. But you'll notice there's a lot of things in here. Index of, last index of, substring. These are all designed to see whether or not inside of whatever string you're looking at, there is another string, a substring inside of it. Now, with most of these, you have to realize that when you start counting with a string, with most of these, it starts counting with 0. The reason that that's important is with things like index of and last index of and substring, what'll happen is if it doesn't find what it's looking for, it doesn't return 0, it returns a -1. All right. So if something you're searching for is not there, it'll return -1. All right. The only way that these things are going to make sense is to start seeing some examples of them. So we'll look at examples in just a bit. All right. Also, you'll notice there's a pad left and a pad right. All right. Maybe you've seen this kind of thing already where somebody goes in and you get a check, from a company and it's for, let's say, $1.84. And it might look like this. Okay. Something like that. And they're making sure that you aren't able to go in here and put your own numbers in there. So they have padded right there. They have padded, basically done the left kind of pad. All right. And you can pad on the left and you can pad on the right. All right. Remove does just that, returns a string with a specified number of characters removed. You'll notice with most of these, they'll say start index and string, or they'll say whatever, but you have some control over where you start searching and the direction in which you start searching. So with the index of, it starts from the beginning. With the last index of, it basically is starting from the end. All right. There's a replace. And if you've ever done any work with anything, for example, if you've ever done anything like using Word, Microsoft Word, where you've got to search and replace, kind of works the same way. All right. The two lower, the two upper, we've used all semester. The trim we have looked at and at least used on occasion. And again, if you've never heard the story, this is what I've been told at least, that what used to happen is when somebody would put a form out on the internet and they would say that these fields are required, whatever the fields were, and people didn't feel like filling anything out, they would just go in there and hit the space bar. Trim makes sure you don't do that because it removes both any leading spaces and any trailing spaces. And I've probably shown you this already, but just in case, if you had something like this, so let's say you said space, 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 hello out there, space, 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 and you ran trim, it would get rid of those leading spaces, it would get rid of those trailing spaces, but it does not get rid of the spaces that are within the string itself. Split is kind of neat. All right. So again, looking at that example that I just showed you, if we did this and ran split on it, okay. So if we had a string, that was called greeting, and we set it equal to hello out there. All right. And then we did we said string bracket bracket greet equals greeting dot split, and I think we have to tell it what to split it on. That would be the blank space. That would be the same thing as saying greet 0 equals hello, hello, greet 1 equal out, and greet 2 equal there. And you might look at that and go, okay, I actually get that, but why would you ever want to do that? All right. The reason that you might want to do that is there are certain things that you can do with an array that you can't do with a regular string. So that may be a reason for splitting them. I don't know. It depends on what it is you're attempting to do. All right. And the other one that you end up using, not so much this semester, but you will end up using it, I think, especially in the fourth semester, is the is null or empty. Notice it returns a Boolean. So it'll check to see if the string is either null, meaning that it hasn't been set yet, has no value, or it's been set, but it's been set to the empty string. All right. If it's either set to null or it's set to the empty string, that'll return true. Otherwise, it'll return false. All right. Finally, as the description says there on the bottom, it says you can use an index to access each character in a string. 0 is the first character. If you haven't seen me do this already, shame on me. But if I do this, so let's go back and we'll make this even simpler rather. We'll say string reading. We'll just say equals hello, just hello, not the hello out there or anything. All right. If I want, I can actually work with greeting 0. If I ask for that, that's going to be basically that's going to be equal to H. Greeting 1 will be E, greeting 2 will be L, greeting 3 will be L, greeting 4 will be O. So what I'm saying is you can actually take a string and work with its components as though they're an array. All right. And I believe we did this in an earlier example where we said, do you want to run the program again? Yes or no? All right. So we took something like this and you expect it to be a Y or an N, but the person could put in the word yes or the word no. So we grabbed just the first letter that was in there, uppercased it, and saw if it was a Y or an N. All right. All right. So code examples that work with strings. And again, this is how you learn this stuff. Like I said, it's not from me spitting this stuff back out at you, etc. It's by starting to write some programs. So what do they have here? Well, notice they're working with a string. All right, they made it a char, and you don't even have to do that. There's different ways around this, but this is just a single character now. So really, when you look at this, what this is right here, this string chars is the equivalent of creating an array with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 elements in it. So you can pull out and work with any of the individual elements if you want to. All right. So they take this string and they kind of do that, but they grab the individual letters and put a blank space between them. So you can see now that rather than it reading like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, it's A space, B space, etc. And they show you how you can do that using both a for loop and one of those for each loops. And before you might look at that and go, that's fine and dandy. Who the heck would ever want to use this? You'd be surprised. All right. And all I'm saying is people have it, for years the stuff that people want to find when you data mine or when you look through like a database of data looking for certain information, some of the stuff that you think is like, who would care about that? Well, again, in a company, for example, a marketing person might care about something, all right, that you could care less about, right? Again, as always, it just depends, all right? So they give you examples of doing that, and then the starts with and ends with, again, you'll notice they return Booleans. They give you the index of and the last index of. So you'll see in here, where's your first blank space? So it's at 0, 1, 2, 3. That would be 4. And that's exactly what gets returned. All right. And let's see. There they're doing it with a character space. So it's giving you the same thing. All right. And they're saying, where is that ink? Well, notice it returns -1. There is no ink in here. All right. And then where is the last space? So it'd be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. How did they get 15? I don't know. But they're starting. Actually, I think they are starting from the beginning and they're asking for the last one. So let's look. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. That is, if you start from the beginning. All right. Then there's remove, insert, and replace examples. Again, there's substring, etc. There's a lot of different things that you can do with strings. All right. All right. More code examples that work with strings. Let's go over this, and then we're going to take a break. All right. These, in a way at least, are probably better examples because they're more complete. Okay. So we've got this thing in here. You'll notice that if we run trim, how that changes from the blank spaces here and here to it gets rid of the leading or the trailing spaces. All right. First space, why you'd want that, I have absolutely no idea. All right. So some of the examples are contrived, but at the same time, they're just meant to show you the different methods that are available in the string class. Now they've got a thing here that parses an address. All right. Now let's not even think about the address right now, but let's think of, for example, a phone number. And let's suppose you have to put the phone number, what you want to do is you're making the person put in a phone number as 3 digits, which represent the area code, then a hyphen, then 3 more digits, which represent what's called the exchange, and then a hyphen, and then 4 digits. Well, I mean, I could go through there and I could search to see, for example, how many area codes begin with 314. All right, so there's a lot of reasons that you might want to use these. Okay, all right. They show you a split example here. I don't know if I think it's necessarily a great example. All right, but fine. They've got a bunch of split examples here. Okay, here's a good example. All right, and you'll actually find these last couple of examples really actually used in the real world. What do I mean? Well, a lot of companies, what they do is when they store phone numbers, even though I wouldn't recommend doing it like this, all right, they store them as number fields. And that would work if that was a number field. But if they display them, for example, on a report, you wouldn't want it to look like just numbers. You'd want to put the dash in there. I mean, if you look at someone's social security number, if you see 111-22-3333, most people think social security number. But if you see 11111 or 111223333, to most people, it wouldn't make a lot of sense. So doing things like adding hyphens to a phone number, adding hyphens and a date, or putting slashes in or whatever. On this example on the bottom of the page, it's replacing slashes with, or dashes rather, with slashes. All right, so there's a bunch of different examples. All right, it is 9 o'clock. Let's take 10 minutes and we'll pick it up on page 288, going into string interpolation. All right, I need to get a refill on my drink, so I'll be back in just a couple minutes. All right, it is 9:10, so I'm going to start back up and just was thinking about this. And what I think I'm going to do is, let's see, start up a new session of Visual Studio here. And I'm going to create a new project. And I'm going to make it real simple. It's just going to be a console app. All right. And I'm just going to call it Simple Calculator. It'll be a real simple one. And I like to do it this way. There's other ways with what I'm about to show you, but I'm going to come up here anyway. And on my desktop, I want to make a new folder that I'll call Simple Calc. All right. So there that is on the desktop. So I'll click here and I will click desktop. And there's Simple Calc. Select folder. So there that is. And we'll just call this calculator. Okay. All right. So this, like I said, this is just a real, well, I screwed that up, but that's okay. It's a real simple example. I'm not going to make methods or anything in here. I'm just going to keep it real simple. All right. So I'm going to come in here and create two variables. We'll make a decimal num1. All right. We'll make a decimal num2. And we'll make, we'll make a couple more things in here. We'll make a decimal sum, a decimal diff for difference, a decimal prod for product, and a decimal quote for quote. Any, I'm not going to do any validation in here. So it'd be easy to break this program. I know you get that, but I'm going to say this. Let's see, I'm going to say num1. In fact, let's just add up here. Keep it simple for ourselves. I'm going to do my using static system.console. All right. So I'm going to come in here and say num1 equal read line. In fact, we'll have to do a decimal dot parse read line. All right. And since I'm doing that, I really should have a write first that says enter number 1, like that. All right. So that'll give me number 1. And then we hit enter and we'll copy it. And then we'll say enter number 2. All right. And num2 equals that. All right. So you know the drill. We've done this enough times. So I can say sum equals num1 plus num2. Diff equals num1 minus num2. The IntelliSense is nice here. Prod equals number 1 times num2. And finally, quote equals number 1 divided by number 2. All right, we could even come in here and put in an int, which would be mod. All right, and mod, probably could have made that a decimal too, but I didn't want to, equals num1 modulo num2. All right, nothing big here. It's not that there's anything here that you don't understand. Let me make that an integer. And that should be an I. All right. And it doesn't like something I'm doing here, so let's see. Int cannot be used like a method. Well, let's do this. Just get rid of mod. I don't care. It's not what I'm trying to show you right now anyway. But you all should know this, that I could write something that I consider to be ugly right now. Okay, so I can come in here and I can do this. Right line. And we'll put a backslash n before it, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to say backslash n plus num1 all right, so num1 plus num2 plus equals plus sum. I think I did that right. We're going to find out in just a moment. In fact, we won't even, yeah, we'll leave it like that. I'll only need one of these. Whoops. And I'll want to change these, of course. So this one will be minus. This one will be times. And this one will be divide. All right. And of course, then this one will be diff. The next one will be prod. The next one will be quote. All right. Now, I can take all of these and say dot to string. And I could make it, do an N2, etc. All right. So we've got all that. That's all. And at the bottom here, we'll put in here a read line so it doesn't fly off the page. All right. So there's my program. So I'm going to file save all, and I'm going to run it. And I'm going to keep it simple. It'd fly off the page anyway. No. All right, so enter number 1, 34. Enter number 2, 9. So you see that, and it works just fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong at all what I've just done. All right. However, hopefully you realized that when I did this, it's really pretty doggone easy to do this and make a mistake when you're doing all this stuff. So I'm going to put another right line up above this. Print out values. And I'm going to say the old-fashioned way. All right. Let's make sure I didn't break anything. So again, it doesn't matter. We'll just pick out any two numbers, 5 and 2. So print out values the old-fashioned way. So I need a blank space there and not one after that. Okay. So I'm going to grab that backslash n that we had there and put it here. There we go. Whoops. I don't know what I did there, but something stupid. All right. There's got to be a better way to print these out. And of course, there is. So I'm going to grab all that. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to put it right back down here again. And we'll say instead of printing them out the old-fashioned way, we're going to print them out the new-fangled way. All right. And we're going to change all of these. All right. What do I mean? Well, we're going to come in here, and with each one of these right lines, we're going to start it with a $sign. All right. Then every time I want to have a variable in here, I have to put it in curly braces. Whoops. So there's num1, and there it is in curly braces. I don't know why, but the system is doing that. I'm not. All right. Now I can just use a plus sign. And now I can put in num2 again inside of curly braces. And then put in my equal sign. and then put in my sum, the whole thing. So the sum, toString, etc., everything that's in there. And again, this in like that. Now, it's giving me an error here because I should put the whole thing inside of double quotes. All right. So let me grab this one. We'll get rid of the other ones. And this will become minus. This will become times. This will become divide. This will stay sum. Then this will be diff and prod and quote. All right. So let's see if it worked. All right. And you'll notice I get the same answers with both. Now, when you interpolate, which is what we did in the second example, rather than having to constantly break out of a string to put in a to put in actual variable values, we don't have to do that anymore. All right. So if you look at this, it's not that it buys you a lot, it's a few keystrokes, but it makes, I think at least, the understanding that much easier because I don't have to worry, gee, did I put too many or too few spaces in there, etc. So when you use this interpolation like this, all right, you start it with a $sign, then you put everything within double quotes because you're printing it out now as one huge string, but you're letting the system know that anytime you have anything that's within double quotes, that's within curly braces, that's a variable and you want to use its value. And as shown here, you can even come in and manipulate that value. All right. Now with the sum and the difference and the product, it's not going to matter so much other than we just put all of them to two decimal places. But it does matter with the quote because if you do like a 59 divided by 7, it could end up being like 7.345, something like that. When you're using right lines from now on, I'm going to expect that when you use those, that you will use string interpolation. Now, it doesn't seem to work very well with some of the stuff that we use. For instance, I've had problems trying to get it to work with message boxes. Maybe I'm just doing something wrong, but let's take a look at what they say in the book. All right. Up until now, we've used the plus operator, and not just for addition, of course, but as what's called a string concatenation operator. All right. It says figure 9.8 shows how to use a new feature that became available Sharp 6.0. So it's not that new. I'd say it's probably 5 or more years old. That's called interpolated strings. As it says, you code a $sign followed by a string literal in which you can have one or more interpolated expressions that go within curly braces. All right. So they will show you some examples of this. All right. So it says the first example, hopefully at least that just makes sense. But as I showed you before, I think we even looked at something a while ago. Here, that worked just fine. All right. But we should be able to do this too. We should be able to say, I think that's what they're showing here. See that? So rather than having, putting it the way we've done it, notice in there, okay, if we had done it the other way, we would have said string name equal last name space, plus space, double quote, comma, double quote, or I'm sorry, double quote, comma, space, etc. So this just makes it a little easier to work with. Now, not everybody agrees with that, right? Some people still like doing it the old way, but I think this is one time where I'm going to ask you to actually do this, because maybe I'm wrong, but I think it makes sense to do it this way. All right. Now, then they show how you can join together a constant and a number. It's kind of what we just did. All right. Or a string and a number. You can use it for constants. All right. That's kind of neat, because if you've created something at the top of your program like this, and you're going to use it all over the place, then you don't have to keep repeating it. As it says, you can use it. It can span an interpolated expression that spans multiple lines. All right. So there's a lot of different ways that this can be used. All right. For now, we're just going to probably keep it fairly simple. So as it says there, in addition to using the plus to join a string with another string or value type, you can create interpolated strings. You can read the rest of the stuff there yourselves. All right. Now, we have talked parse, we have talked try-parse before, but I would really like to take a few minutes to go over the main difference between the two. All right. Some of it is just right in the verbiage. If you do a decimal dot try parse, that means it could fail. You typically only do a decimal dot parse when you know it won't fail. All right, I want to say that again. The main difference between those is you typically will do a try parse, and we're going to look at it in just a minute. We've done these before when you know something could possibly fail. But if you can be, in your own mind at least, 100% sure, you use the parse. The parse is easier. All right, because with the try parse, you have to use in just a minute. Now, I don't know why they decided to introduce it right here, but they did. So when you take a look at what's on the screen here, all right, this common members of the number styles, enumeration, etc. Here are different ways that you can use some formatting. All right, putting a dollar sign in, etc. I'm not that concerned with number styles. Okay, they will show you some examples in here. I'm concerned with this right here. So when you do the parse, okay, this is what you're trying to parse, and this is what you're going to try to put it into, basically. All right. The try parse, though, boy, oh boy, the try parse, you need that out variable. This is the thing. Typically, they're not in this example, but usually with a try parse, that's when I've always used like result equal decimal dot try parse, because you know that then you check it for failure. All right. And when you're checking it for failure, all right, the try parse didn't work. Now it says by default, commas, a decimal point, and a leading and trailing spaces are allowed in a decimal value when you use parse or try parse. I don't use them anyway. The only one I'll use is the decimal point. All right. Some quirky things can at least conceivably happen. All right. When the system is expecting one thing, I'm going to use, or I'm going to use try parse the way that I set it up. There's only three things that I'm going to allow. And that is, I don't know why I'd want a plus sign at the beginning, but I could put it in there. All right. A minus sign, numbers, and I guess a decimal point also for the decimal dot try parse. All right. So if you do want to restrict the characters that can be entered, You can change the second argument, and they show that here by using that number styles. To me, that's just more work than you have to do. But, I mean, there may be a very, very valid reason to use that too. The parse and triparse methods remove any of the specified characters from the string that aren't allowed. All right. All right. And it says here the number styles enumeration is in the system.globalization namespace. And again, globalization is one of those things that is going to be pretty much country independent. All right. Sometimes it's called globalization. I've heard it called internationalization, etc. All right. Now they talk in here about immutable and mutable. I tried to show you those already. But the idea is when you use a string builder class, all right, you can build whatever it is you want to build. You can put whatever it is you want to put in there. So it's a string, but it's a string that is mutable. In other words, it's changeable. Now, what's important though is once you get it in its final format, you want to convert it from a string builder to a string object. All right. Okay. So they show in here ways that you can do it. And in many ways, it looks like kind of like when we just were working with lists. All right. Like there's an insert and a remove and a replace, etc. All right. Now, again, I'm not going to be so brazen as to say to you, hey, you never use this anyway. I don't use it very often, if ever. But if you were a professional programmer in the right circumstance, you might use it all the time. All right. I don't think, again, there'll be anything on the test or the pretest with string builder. So unlike string objects, string builders are mutable, which means they can be changed. All right. The capacity is the amount of memory that's allocated to it. Notice it's increased automatically whenever necessary. And if you don't set one, it defaults to 16. I believe, again, that's the same way that it works with lists. All right. Okay, and it's a member of the system.text namespace. Okay. So the last part of this chapter, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at this last part, last 10 pages or so. Then we're going to jump in and take a look at a couple of those payroll programs. By that time, it'll probably be time for another break. Then we're going to go through chapter 11. All right, we're going to skip 10 until tomorrow, but we'll go through chapter 11, which is on debugging. Then tomorrow we'll pick it up with chapter 10. And again, we'll do the same kind of thing. We'll go through some examples, etc. So how to format numbers, dates, and times. Some of this you already know. All right. For instance, n means number. I use n2 if I want a number with 2 decimal places. All right. If you just put n, there'll be no decimal places. We've used C for currency. All right. And you can see we've used a little bit, we may or may not have, but P for percentage. And again, these can be, as it shows there, uppercase or lowercase. All right. You can have placeholders if you want to. And they show an example here of a placeholder. It says 0:D3, 43. So notice you want it to be 3 places long and you want a 0. So if that had been just 3 in there instead of 43, it would be 003. And there's ways that you can use this. There's reasons that you might want to use something like this. All right. So formatting dates and times. Again, you can take a look in here. I'm not going to run through these examples, but there's a lot of different things that you can do. Notice when you look at this, and I don't know why it was set up like this, but it was, that the day part, I should say, the day and the year are all in lowercase, all the formats. The month is uppercase. I don't know why somebody set it up like that. But for instance, if I wanted something to say year, then day, then month, YYY hyphen MM hyphen DD, something like that. All right. And you'll notice if I just do a D, it won't give me any leading zeros. So in other words, if the month, if I use that there, it for the, or the day, if I did it without the leading zeros, like this month is the 6th. So if I did it with leading zeros, it would be 06. Without it would just be 6. And again, as always, they give you some examples of the usage in here. All right, how to use interpolated strings for formatting. We're winding our way down in the chapter here, and they'll show you some examples. Now, I will tell you, I mean, I wouldn't give you something that looked like this. Come on, that would just be very, very confusing. And my goal here is to avoid confusion whenever possible. All right, now it's interesting here in the message box show, they're using interpolation. And I have had interpolation both work and give me problems using it in the message box. So you want to try it in there, great. All right. So as it says here, instead of using format, you can use interpolated strings. All right. An interpolated expression that performs formatting is similar to a formatting specification. As always, they're giving you more than one way of doing the same thing. And again, I'm not going to say you should use this one or you should use this one. Okay. But you might find when you take your next test that it might say something like use string interpolation whenever possible. And it might be worth a few points on the test. We'll see. And that's it for the chapter. All right. So what I'm going to do before we head on, and we will, I'm going to jump into what's exactly, but I'm pretty close. So before we jump into chapter 11, let's take a look. And again, you will get these by the end of the day today. But let's go in and take a look here at some of these examples that are here. And I'm going to start the last one that we did here. We want to close all this stuff. The last one here that we did as a class, I believe, was this payroll GUI 03 that looked like this. I think it's green. No, it's yellow. But you can see it was pretty simple. We had a first name and a last name, and hours worked, and an hourly rate. Those were our 4 inputs. Then, and I don't remember it. I don't honestly remember. So if we go look in here, all right, we just use if statements. So in other words, if we came in here, I'm gonna go back to that one. If we came into the third example and we left it blank here and we click calculate, we got that message that came up. Remember, this is all review, but there's basically 3 different ways that you can handle or not handle bad input data. Number 1 is to do nothing and expect that the person running the program will always do it in the right way. And we've talked about before why that's foolish. It makes no sense to do that. All right. Next, you can come in like we've done here and surround it with if statements. All right. And finally, you can go in and you can use exception handling. Now, in here, this is data validation. We are doing data validation. We're not doing it the way that Muroc did it in the book. There's not an is present, etc., but it is data validation. All right. Okay, so, I mean, that'll come in here, and if I do come in, let me just put myself in here, and let's see, I think we have, overtime in here, but we'll find out. Yes, we do, and this will keep going. Now, one thing that's about this, okay, and this is what you're gonna see again as we move on and talk about a few things, but, okay, so I just put myself in. What if I accidentally click that again? Well, now there's 2 employees that are both got my name, etcetera. So one thing we could have done there, all right, one thing that we could have done there is after I printed everything out, so after we have all the stuff printed out in here, so gross pay, okay, I could have come in and said TXT, I'm sorry, BTN calculate dot enabled equal false, just like that. Now watch the difference here when I run this. So I put in again, all right, and I click calculate. Now the button is disabled. I can't do it again, all right? But for instance, I could force you to click the clear button for that to come back. So again, I could come into my clear button here, my routine for my clear button. This is all stuff we did earlier, so I don't even know where the clear button is in here, but it's in here someplace, I think. There it is. All right. There's all that clear all stuff, but we could come in here and also say BTN calculate dot enabled equal true. All right. So now when we run the program, we've got that and it's disabled. However, when I click clear, all right, and I guess I didn't have all that stuff in there, but it, well, it should have been enabled. So why wasn't it? Let's check. Make sure I've got the right program up here, as I think I do. Okay, there's calculate. There's, what is that? This is calculate. All right. And that's being called from there. Oh, I've got why is it giving me calculate with both of those? This is calculate, BTN calculate. This is clear, and this is exit. Exit looks fine. But for some weird reason, when I double click on clear, it's going to calculate. And I don't have any idea why. Should be going to BTN clear here, and it's not. Oh, because I've got to click one in here. Okay, it's because I copied stuff over. This is done very poorly. So let me go back and see if I can fix that. Okay, that's now done. Now let's see if I click this. There, that's what I wanted, was clear. Now I've already got a clear in here. This is the problem when you do a lot of copying and pasting like I've done in these programs. That's why I would never recommend doing that. But notice I've got a calculate, click one, and a clear, click one. I'll leave that one in there. I may need it. See if that fixes it. All right, it's disabled. Now it's enabled. All right. And it doesn't, maybe that doesn't seem like a big thing to you, but it's again showing how you've got the power of the pen, so to speak. All right. So you're the one who can control. Now, I'm not saying that it would be impossible. I could type in Jeff Scott 5010 in there again, but I'm not making it possible for the user to put in a name, a first name, a last name, and hours worked, and hourly rate. Click calculate and keep clicking it. All right. And I did that by just putting in that enabled property. All right. So that was those are the ones that we did before. All right. So let me do a save on here and we close that and bring up the next one. So these are the ones that you're going to see now that I've worked on Friday and last weekend. So number 4 here, when you look, it looks pretty much the same. All right. But we've got try catch in here. All right. So you'll be able to take a look at that. And if you need something to use as a template or whatever to try to do some stuff with try catch, you'll be able to do that. Notice I've got that is valid data that's in here. So there it is. So we still have the is present, is decimal, is within range. So this is a combination of try catch and regular data validation. Okay. And if we look at it again, wrong one. It works virtually the same as what we saw before. Okay. Except now this is the message we're getting from our catch. Okay. All right. Close that. And bring up number 5. So this is the first time you see in here, when you look, we've added 2 new fields. I moved the first name and the last name. This used to be underneath this, but I moved them side to side. And here's a hire date, and here's the years of service. Now, when we go back and we look in here, this is where I started to transition over and make these into arrays. The reason I'm showing you this is you'll notice I have, for the first time that you've probably seen this, we've got a date time array. So you'll notice that with each one of these, I did set all 6 things, but since I set the last 3 digits in each one of them to 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, it's all midnight. All right. But the first person, you should be able to figure all this out. I just pretended that we had this company and it has 10 employees and they were hired over 10 different years. 1 in 2000, 1 in 2001, 1 in 2002, etc. And I just randomly put in there. It does show you how you can take a group of date time objects and put them into a date time array. You can literally make an array of any type of thing. You know, scalar values, and we've done that. We've had int arrays and string arrays, etc. All right, but you can make an array of date time objects, or like when we get to chapter 12, and if we were to create our own employee object, we could make an array of those as well. All right. So this program has changed. Notice it still has the try catch, but this is where we were working over and we were doing the stuff we did in class with lookup. So I changed. These are the 10 employees we have. I just gave them sequential numbers. Didn't have to do that. All right. And we're going to change this and we'll look at that in just a little bit. All right. Because there's duplication there where there really doesn't have to be. All right. Then we've got our names, first names, our last names, again, our hire dates, our hours worked, and our hourly rate. All right. And again, just like you saw previously, then this is being used, excuse me, this is being used, and it's being used with both the try catch and the is valid data, meaning that in here we again have our is present, is decimal, is in 32, is now there's an is date. And you'll notice that it pretty much works the same way that it's worked in the past. All right. I do want to mention this thing in here. I've added something in here. So let's just look for a second. We'll look at the is present. Okay. We'll just look at this one. Now, what they have in the book, they, meaning Muroc, is theirs basically stops there. They didn't put the control in there. The control, all right, the control is the name of the text box. The value is what's inside of the text box. So when we're checking this, we're saying, is that text box empty? And we could now, because you've learned this, we could have even said dot trim like that. That would have been cleaner. All right. So if the value, meaning what's in that text box, all right, if it is empty, then we're going to say the name, that's the tag name that we put in there. So again, going back here, if I go to employee ID, you'll notice that when I get to tag, I've got employee ID. First name, I've got a tag name of first name, except when you put in these tag names, you can, C-A-N, you can have a blank space in those tag names because it's just a string. You don't have to, but you can. You can run stuff together as one word, or you can put it in as multiple words. All right. But what I'm getting to is this is the name of the control. So if this is txt employee ID dot text, then this is txt employee ID. The only reason that I put that in there is so that I could call this routine. And what this routine does, it's 2 lines long. It's right there. It says take whatever control we're talking about and remove any text that's in it. So for instance, if I put non-numeric text in the hours worked, that's going to take that text out of there, and then it's going to set the focus to there. So again, you'll see that if I do this, this only checks for is present. That's all this is checking for. All right. But you'll notice that if I go to here, now if I type in Jeff, all right, now I moved over to, oops, the ID is, sorry, that's 1000. All right. And, but if I were to come in here and, basically put in Jeff and not put a last name in, all right, department is a required field. Okay. But notice where it jumped to. So I can say web programming. All right, last name is a required field, but we were just on web programming. When I click OK, it moves me back there. All right, that's what that routine is doing. So if I come back in here again and I say for last name, I'll put in Scott, and for, I must have skipped that, but for hire date, I guess I didn't reset my tab order, but if I put in 6/12/2023, all right, now when I click, what do I get? Hours worked is a required field, and hours worked must be a valid decimal value. But if I come through here and put in junk and then move down to here and click this, now I get it must be a decimal value. It clears the field out and it puts the focus there. The way that I was able to do that is through the use of this method right here. And it's not so much that you have to do that, but the idea is the easier you can make it for the person that you are writing the application for, the less chance they're going to screw it up. Now, I used to work with an individual at a different school, and I used to hear him tell students, just basically imagine that everybody who runs your program is an idiot. Now, I think that's a little bit going too far, but I said, just imagine that many of the people who will run the program are uninformed. All right. So you want to make it as hard for them to screw up as possible. That's all. All right. Now, when we get down to the date, notice in here, this is the first time probably you've seen this is a date time parse. Now, I thought I had some problems with this. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Let me try to comment that out. Let's see, what doesn't it like? It might be that with the date there, oh, I'm not sure. Let me look. It's hire date. It does have a tag that says hire date, so that's not a problem. All right. But let me look at what the error is there. Object reference is required for the non-static field, property, etc. So it doesn't like me using that with this. I don't remember what the error on that was. So the only reason I'm telling you that is when I commented out, yes, it works. And if I do put an invalid date in there, so if I put in a value here, and I leave this blank, I do get hire date is a required field. And if I do come in here and put in something that's not valid, I get it must be a valid date, but it's not clearing. All right, I have to look at that to figure out why. And I believe we're going to find this out right now. I'm going to put in the month, but I'm going to put in an invalid month, the day, and I'll put in an invalid day, and the year. And you'll notice hire date is not a valid date. All right. And I think it's even got it built in so that if we put in a hire date, you'll notice if we did put in a hire date of, let's see, 2/29/2023, because this is not a leap year, it's not a valid date. All right. But if we put in next year, we don't get that error. Now it says this is a different check. All right. That says the hire date must be between 2000 and the current date. But if I do come in here and put in 2004, so if I put in 2004, it takes it, and that is a leap year. In fact, I should change that to 2/29/2004. All right, it took it, and now it's saying hours worked is bad. All right, so again, this is a combination of me using some of the built-in stuff, all right, that we were given in the book and some of my own. Now, we could have used some of that format style stuff. So for hours worked, we could have put, if you worked, I don't know, if this was a yearly thing and you worked 1,000 hours, we could have put it in like this. The problem is doing it like that now, we get an error because we haven't used any of that. Same thing with the rate. So if I put a 40 in here, and I say there's an hour and click it, I get an error. Whereas if I put 1,000 in here, I might get an error, but if I get an error, it's because this is an out of range value. Okay. But if I come through here now and just put in 80, it works just fine. All right. And in this example, it looks like I don't have any overtime calculation put in. I don't know why, but I don't. All right. So these are just things that I wanted to show you. Now, when we look in here and we look at what's in here, remember, this is basically set up to be a lookup program. So when I put 1,000 in here, it gives me this stuff. Ben Jones, web, et cetera, et cetera. So where is it getting that from? Just exactly where you'd guess it is getting it from. In other words, as we come in here and we look in here, well, 1,000, okay. Web programming, okay. Ben, okay. Jones, okay. 2000, the year 2000, 10-1. So that's correct. We're going to look at the years of service in a minute, but the 40 and the 10. All right. So that's all stuff that is being grabbed from here. In other words, I am pre-populating arrays with values. Now, you might say that sure seems like a lot of work. And you know what? It sure as heck is. Now, when we get to chapter 17 and we talk about files, this wouldn't be that bad if we have 1,000 employees and we have all the information for each employee in a file. Then it's not bad. Then we just have to put a loop in and cycle through it and figure that out. That's not a big thing. But with what we're doing now, yeah, that's kind of a pain in the behind. Now you'll notice that this was 10-1, but it's got 22 years of service because we haven't reached 10-1 of 2023 yet. All right, if I go back and change this to a 1, all right, you'll notice now that person 22, but 1-3 has already passed in 2001. So indeed, they do have 22 years of service. All right. Now, I could have probably taken the time myself to try to figure out how the heck to do that. But, like I said, it was last Friday, and Friday technically, I'm not even, it's not a work day, but I was working anyway. So I went down, and I just want to show you what I did for this. Again, you're going to get all this code. So this was pre-populating those text boxes. All right, here, if we put in an ID that was bad, it should say not found. So if I run this and put in there 3456 and there isn't one, it says no employee with ID number inputted. Employee ID 3456 not found. All right, again, I should have cleared that, but I didn't. That's okay. All right, so really in here, I should have just said txt, txt employee ID dot text equal nothing, txt employee ID dot focus. Now, one thing I want you to all understand, we've talked about this before, and that is this, that with what we're working with in here, if we end up doing that, only 2 lines of code. If we end up doing that all over the place in the program, it might be worth writing my own routine for that and then calling the routine there. So if I'm doing it 10 different places, all right, that's 20 lines of code that I could replace with basically 12 lines of code or so. These two, and then the call statement. All right, it's not that big a thing, but over time, you can start to really save yourself a lot of work doing it that way. All right, so if I do come in here now and say 3456, and I click lookup, and that it clears it, it puts it back there. All right. So this was the thing for the years of service. And again, I'm not lying with, I'm just telling you that what I did was I went online and looked it up. So we've got a date time variable that I just called now, no biggie. All right. And that gave me date time dot today. So if I ran that today, it's going to give me 6-12-2023. And since I didn't ask for any special time or anything, it'll probably should give me the current time, to be honest with you. But then for the TOS variable, time of service, I said now dot year, which is going to give me 2023, minus the hire date dot year. All right. But then that if statement, what it is saying in there basically is figure out whether or not the current date, all right, the now dot, not now dot date, but basically the whole hire date, has it occurred yet in the current year? And if it has, subtract one. I'm sorry, if it has not yet occurred. All right. So in other words, if my date of service is 6/15 and 6/15 has not yet occurred, all right. So 6/15 has not yet occurred, then I want to make sure that if my time of service was 20 years on 6/15, it's now 19. So that's what we're doing there. All right. And hopefully one of the things that you're realizing as we're going through all these things, we'll do another one, then we'll take another break. But hopefully one of the things that you're understanding as we go through this is I'm writing the same program. Yes, I'm making modifications to it. Of course I am, but it's the same program. All right. And again, we're using the same logic in basically every program as well. A bit there. All right. So I want to close what I've got open here. Now, I'm going to very quickly before the break just mention something to you. All right, I'm going to just mention something to you that we're going to be talking about tomorrow. All right, so let me set this up as my start project because this one's different. It may not look like it, but it is. This has got a drop-down list. So I'm assuming there's 5 departments and I have them in alphabetic order. Now, if they were in true alphabetic order, it would be accounting, auditing, choose a department. So I put a blank space before choose a department. And that's why they look like this. All right. Now I can still come in and do a lookup. So I can leave it there, or I can put it anywhere. I'll put it here. And I can still come in there and type in 1000 and click lookup. Well, I thought I could. Boy, oh boy. I don't remember this as well as I thought I did. All right, let's come in here and do this. Because this should all work. I'm going to have to clean this up before I give it to you. So, all right, it's not calculating the years of service. And when I clear it all and I try to do a lookup, what I wanted to get to is this is talking about one of the things that we will be talking about tomorrow. All right. All right. And there's just one more that I've done in here. And again, I'll clean these up before I put them out there. And that is this one. And again, we're not going to talk about this one anymore today. This is the one I showed you before, but it's got in there now a group box. In the group box, it's got 2 radio buttons. Here is a list box. And here is a checkbox. So we're going to look at all of that stuff. All right. Okay. So what I want to do after we get back from the break, all right, because we'll probably only go till, I don't know, 11, I would think at the latest today. All right. But what I want to do after we get back from the break is I want us to start going through chapter 11. All right. I'm going to bring up a program and actually start to run some of these debug type of features and functionality on there so you can see exactly what's happening. All right. Okay. So it's 10:10. Let's come back at 10:20. We'll pick it up from right there. And like I said, then we're going to go over chapter 11. All right. I will talk to you in 10 minutes. All right, then it is 10:20, so I'm going to continue on. And just to mention to you, just so you see this, and you may or may not know this already, I don't know, but we're going to talk about debugging right now. And when you are debugging a program, there's a few terms that you should at least be a little bit familiar with. The first are compile time errors. I go back to the program that we looked at before, this thing with the right lines in there, okay? And after this one read line at the end, I get rid of the semicolon that's on the end and I run the program. It comes back and it says, hey, there were errors. Literally 100 times out of 100, whenever I get this, it says you want to go back to the last version that worked. I'm going to say no. And I'm going to look in here and it's going to show me, in fact, if I put my mouse there, it can't do much more to help me. Or in fact, if I put my mouse there, it's going to show me. And a lot of times I'll get this, where basically it'll offer me some help. Or it might be the help I want, it might not be. But those are compile time errors. Those are the simplest because, for lack of better words, they're found for us. All right. Then you get runtime errors. And as you'd guess, you don't figure out what those errors are until you run the program. All right, let's purposely put a runtime error in here. So I'll run the program. I didn't make any occurrences in here on our divide by zero. So what do we get? System divide by zero exception. That was a runtime error. Why? Because it did not occur until runtime. Now, when you look at this, you can click here, show call stack, and it'll show you basically in here as you work your way through what was called, etc. In here. You can view the details. So this is basically replicating a lot of what's in here, but it's showing you, and you may or may not be able to figure out the problem based on that. All right. Then you've got the copy details, which will copy everything and put it in the clipboard. This is supposedly this start live session. I'm not going to click it now. I've never clicked it. But supposedly there's a community of people out there that if you've got errors that you can't find, all right, that they will help you with them. I don't know how true that is, period. Now, this is a pretty obvious error, but sometimes, you'll get an error that's not so obvious. So I just go and grab the error and I'll type in C# error and I'll paste that in. That's a pretty simple one, and more stuff that's in there will make sense to you. You'll understand it. All right. Now, if I start looking in here and I start looking for answers, you'll notice that right near the top, we get stackoverflow.com. I may or may not have mentioned this to you earlier in the semester. I don't remember. But what Stack Overflow basically is it's kind of like Facebook for geeks. All right. And you can go out to Facebook, on Facebook. You can go out to stackoverflow.com and you can put in, you can search for stuff. You can join it if you want to. Now, I will tell you this. This is a very terse site. The first time I went on here, when I couldn't figure out an error that I had, this is a long time ago. I don't know if it's still out there or not. I don't really remember. All right. But I was told something along the lines of, hey, idiot, if you want us to help you debug your code, you've got to give us a code snippet. All right. And I did that. And then somebody else had put in a comment like, hey, idiot, this is a pretty simplistic error. This should for people, this site is for people who have a clue. So what I'm telling you is that if you post your own questions out there, and you could do that, A, you should provide the code, and B, you should have thoroughly checked for the error yourself and see if you can find it, because this isn't meant to be right here to just replace going out to learn.microsoft.com. But it is a nice site. All right. So again, if I came in here and just put in C# divide by 0 exception, something like that, and hit enter. All right. Are you a human being? Yeah, I'm not a robot. All right. Okay. You're going to find something. Now, that's not a great example, but the point is, there have been a lot of times when I've gone out and literally used this when I just, for whatever reason, can't figure out what the doggone error is. All right. So that's the second type of error. And then, so let me stop this. Let's say that I did this. All right. And I run my program again and I put in 73 and 11. Well, I'm smart enough to know that 73 times 11 is not 6.64. Now, that's a very simple example, but what that is the third type of error, and that is a logic error. And they're typically the hardest type to find. You know, something kind of magical starts to happen when you start to program. In a way, at least, you start to feel this little bit of, for lack of better words, infallibility. And what I have told you in the classroom, and I remember one time this young lady came up and she said, "Hey, Mr. Scott, can you look at my program? You know, it's, I can't figure out what the problem is." And it was a logic error. And I looked at it. I knew I could see it right away, but I didn't want to go, it's like that. So I looked at it for a second or two and I said, "I think the problem's here." And I showed her where the area was, and she figured out what it was, which is what I'm supposed to do as an instructor. And right away, "I didn't do that." Well, you know, it's program. Yes, you did. You just didn't realize you did it. But we're all human. We all make errors. We all make compile time errors. We all make runtime errors. We all make logic errors. So those are the three different types of errors. Now, if I asked you this, what is the goal of testing a program? All right. If you may or may not say this. All right. That is the goal of testing a program, especially if you are writing a program for someone else. You want to find the errors. You don't want them to find them. No, this, and again, these are general types of definitions, but they're pretty much will hold true. Now, when I was in your shoes, and now this was many years ago, when I graduated with a 2-year degree, I already had a 4-year degree, but it was in journalism. I used to be a reporter. All right. But then when I went back and got a 2-year degree in IT, and I got a job as a programmer, all right. Um, one of the, the first projects that I worked on, and I mentioned this to you, I know I have in class before, but it was back in the days of rotary telephones. I was working for AT&T Bell Laboratories, all right, and it was a thing with rotary telephones, and basically it had to do with, we had to set it up so that if you dropped your phone, all right, there had been problems with people dropping phones and losing their calls, and we didn't want them to lose the calls. Okay. So why am I telling you this? Well, that was part of the code that I had to put in. And I had to go up to the laboratory and I had to test it, etc. And I had to write a big design document on it and have people look at it, etc. But The point is, when I got done testing the program, it didn't go out to the field. When I got done testing the program, it went to our system test group. They ran the same tests on it that I had run, plus their own tests. So my job when I wrote the program and then tested it was to find as many errors as possible. It was their job was the same thing. And if they found errors, and they did, they found some weird cases where I hadn't accounted for something. Now, there's only one time in my life, tell you a very quick story, that I remember ever seeing a program that I considered to be bulletproof. All right. I was teaching in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, at a college named Midstate Technical College. Was one of the first programming classes I ever taught. And there was a young man in there named Joe, real name. And for their first program, they had taken 3 tests. For their first program, they had to add the 3 test scores together, divide by 3, figure out their average, and then using a 90, 80, 70, 60, kind of like you've done already, figure out what their current grade was. All right. Was a Joe turned his program in and he said, Mr. Scott, I'd like you to do a favor for me. I said, what's that? He said, please try to break my program. It was 19 pages long. He went in and read the entire manual on the weekend, which was about 1,000 pages long, and tried to put every single possible error combination he could come up with. And that was really the first time I'd ever run a program. This was after I'd been in industry where I couldn't break it. All right. So it is possible to write things like that. Sometimes it's not plausible to write things like that. So 3 types of errors. You should understand those. Testing a program, you should understand that. Debugging, you should understand that. So let's go into chapter 11, but there is just one quick thing I wanted to show you first. All right, first of all, let me change that and make it so it's correct. So that'll be it. Risk. And I'll save that. Whoops. All right. So let me save that. Now, going back to these programs that I'd shown you that I've done that I can now honestly say, unfortunately, some of them are screwed up. But if I go back to, let's just say this one right here, I don't even remember which one that is. Okay, this one. All right. So if I run this program right now, it is totally possible for me to come in and put stuff in anything that's not a read-only text box. But if I go back and I look at my code and I know I have a higher dates array, etc. If I want this program to be a true lookup program, what I should do is take department, last name, first name, hire date, hours worked, and hourly rate. And I should actually take all of those and make them read-only fields. Now this is a true lookup program. Oops, not that one. Sorry. Let me grab this. All right. Because that's the only thing I can put input into. If I put nothing in, boom, it does. It says it's a required field. If I put junk in there, it says that was not, it's still saying it's a required field. I'm not sure why, but, oh, it's because of the code that I wrote. But the point is, if I put in this, now if I click lookup, that's a true lookup program. All right. I can still click the calculate button. Okay, but that is what I mean by a true lookup program right there. All right, I'm going to try to fix all of these before I put them out there this afternoon. That's my promise to you. So let's jump into chapter 11. And as you can see, it's on how to debug an app. Now it says in chapter 3, you'll learn how to work in break mode. Just so you know this, there are really 3 modes that you can be in a computer program. All right, or in Visual Studio here. When I'm here, I am literally right now, I am in design mode. Right now, I am in design mode. What does that mean? That means come through here, I can right mouse click and choose view code or hit F2 to bring the code up, etc. But I can also come in and I can use everything that's in here, all my options. I can go into here, I can go into here, etc. All right. On the other hand, if I go in here and I do this, and I come down, I'm just going to grab a line that I know is going to be hit. So let's see. Let's go right here. Okay. In fact, I don't like that line. Let's go to, yeah, we'll go to calculate gross pay. No, when we call calculate gross pay right there. Okay. Now, this is a breakpoint. Okay, they call it cyan in color. This gray area that's in here is called the gutter area. This is where you set your breakpoints. You can really only set breakpoints on an executable line. What's considered to be an executable line. So I can't set it on a comment. I can't set it on a blank line, etc. All right, but right there, now notice when I run the program and I come in here and type in again 1001 and I click lookup. All right, now when I click calculate, notice it stopped right there. All right, I am now in the second of my modes. I am in break mode. Any code that is run up to this point, this line has not yet run. But I can now take my mouse and I can put it here and it shows me that hours is 37.50. It also shows me that rate is 12.50. I can go back and check things. All right. So if I want to, I can go back and I can check different things. You'll notice if I go by rate, it says 1250 because it's been reset. If I go to hours, it says 37.5 because it's been reset. But you can set break points on really any line that you want to, and you can set multiple breakpoints. So in my calculate routine, all right, if something was being screwed up in there, I could go all the way down, I think it's down here, and find there's the calculate gross pay routine. All right, these are my accumulators right here. So I could come in here if I was having a problem with those. Now, if I go to and I click continue, now I'm here. And I can look at the total number of gross pays I've had has been 1. That gross pay amount is 468.7500, etc. Now this line has not yet run, but that line has. So you can put in as many of these breakpoints as you want. All right. What if I want to keep the breakpoints, but I really don't want them to run right now? So I've got these 2 breakpoints. I should be able to right mouse click over here and choose like insert conditional breakpoint, or I can go up here under debug. There are different ways that you can go and basically turn these off temporarily, or I can just click on it again and it's gone. And I can click on it again and it's gone. Doesn't look like it is, but when I click this, all right, now I'm in the third. Now I'm in execute mode. When I'm in execute mode, I can't go up and do the stuff that's up here. It doesn't make a lot of sense. To get out of it, I got to click right here, or I can click here, or I can click here. type of an example. All right. So kind of keep that in mind as we're going through this. All right. So we've got two different things in here. It's a short chapter. It's 20 pages. Basic debugging techniques and how to use the debugging windows. And I will tell you, probably the one that I use the least often is the one I should use the most often. And that is the different debugging windows, because there is a mountain of information in there if you're willing to go and learn this and actually use it. All right. One of the things that's in here that was not in the previous version of this book is there's now something called hot reload. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. All right. So they do talk about break mode and how you can enter break mode. All right. This is the same stuff that I just showed you. It's a format exception as opposed to a divide by zero exception. All right. Well, remember that if we go back to here and I run my program again, and it says enter number 1, and I don't put anything in there, I get a format exception because it's expecting there to be a number and I've left it blank. The same exact thing will happen if I run it again and it asks me for a number and I put hello. I get the same thing. Sometimes when you are creating a program and you're sitting there and you're thinking, okay, now I want to idiot proof this program. All right. You don't put any error handling in whatsoever. You just start running it and you come up with a bunch of different ways that you know you can make it break. All right. You already know this, but just to show you, all right, back in here, in everything that I've got in here, this enter number 1, enter number 2. All right. I'm going to put everything in here. You've seen this before within a try catch block. So I'm going to put everything in here, everything that we've got. I think I can leave the read line out, but I'm not even sure about that. So there's that. There's everything. Now it's going to give me an error because there's no catch. But the first thing I'm going to catch is I'll catch a format exception. All right. And I'll just put in here right line. The error was, and I'm going to put in here fe.message. Let's see if we can go back and redo this. And I'm going to go back and see if we can interpolate this. So $, the error was fe.message like that. All right. Now we should have handled. See here, it says it's declared but never used, but it is being used right there. Oh, that's because we have to put it in curly braces. And that error should go, or that warning should go away. There we go, it's gone. All right, now we've handled that. So if I do come in here and put in garbage, all right, now it's handled, it's not doing anything because we haven't told it to do any more than that, but that's been handled. Okay, so we've got that done. Well, we already know the other thing too is we can possibly come in here and we can get a divide by zero exception. You already saw that. So we'll do the same thing here. Now, if I go back in here and I run this and I put in 45 and 0, boom. Now, I'm not attempting to recover from this error. Okay, I could. So for this format exception, we could basically write some code in there where we asked you to enter it again, or in there What I'm trying to get across here, though, is what are we doing? We are setting up a try-catch mechanism, all right? And we are setting up that try-catch mechanism so as we come in here, our debugging is easier. We're taking control of the debugging ourselves. So what you saw with that format exception I just put in is rather than getting this, we now have our own message. And I use the system message, but I could have put anything in there in the world that I felt like putting in. It would have been fine. All right. So it mentions here 4 different ways to enter break mode. Number 1, force an unhandled exception to be thrown. I just showed you that. Number 2, set a breakpoint. Okay. Now, I do want to mention to you that because of some settings that are on my machine, this here that bug step into or press F11, the F11 will probably work on your machine. It doesn't work on mine. And it's because of some internal settings I have. But if I want to run my program and I want to run it a line at a time, let me go back to this one here. It's a simpler program, but I can come in and go debug, and I can go down and I can find that step into, that's the F11. This will run my program a line at a time. So it's saying it's right here. If I do another debug F11, all right, and another debug F11, all right, and another one in here. So if I run it again, another debug F11, you can see where I am, and boom, it's showing me that I'm right here, and there's my line. Now, if I purposely put a mistake in here and I put in garbage and I hit enter, now notice it jumped down to there. All right. But what I'm trying to show you is if you've got a program and you just for the life of you cannot figure out, exactly what the heck is going on. Sometimes hitting that F11 key or doing a debug, all right, and then choosing under the debug, choosing the step into is the best way because it will literally run your program one line at a time. The other way you can go into break mode like this is to do a Control-Alt break or do a debug break when the program is executing. All right. Now, if an unhandled exception occurs, Visual Studio enters break mode. You already saw that. It displays the exception helper. You saw that. It highlights the statement that was executed. All right. These data tips, as it says, allow you to see the value of a property while you're in break mode. So you can, like I said, highlight things, etc. Now, this, like I said, notice this was introduced in Visual Studio 2022. To my knowledge, Visual Studio 2022 is now about, I think, 3 years old, something like that. I think it came out in 2020. It could have been 2021. I don't know. All right. They don't come out with a new version of it every year, as you can see. Okay. It says this feature allows you to make changes to and apply them while the app is running. So you can actually go in and make changes to a running program without it breaking. When you do this stuff and you come in here, and if the program's running like this and you discover that there is an error, it's a heck of a lot easier in a GUI app to try to go in and make changes than it is in a console app. I mean, if I make changes right here, it's expecting something here. Boom. It's expecting another thing like that here. Boom. Then the program's, for all intents and purposes, other than the read line, is already done. All right, but there are things, especially if you've got a long program and especially a GUI program where you can go in and utilize this hot reload feature. It says there it's based on the edit and continue feature that was available in earlier versions of Visual Studio. As it mentions there, it allows you to make changes to C# code while you're in break mode, and then click that green button to continue. They mention here that you can use hot reload at any time during the execution of an app by switching to Visual Studio. All right. Then you can make the changes. I will tell you, this is another thing. This might be a fantastic feature. All right. But if I'm in the middle of running a program and I discover while the program is running, I made an error, it's just my nature that I stop the program run by going here. I fix the error and I rerun it. All right. Now, if you do choose to utilize this feature, we'll talk more about it in a second. There are some things you can't do with hot reload, and it'll even say, as they show here, it says that when you try to do whatever this change was, it says it can't automatically make the change. It says the app needs to be rebuilt. Then notice there is a checkbox there that says always rebuild when an update can't be completed. So if you make a change and it needs a rebuild, it'll automatically rebuild it. All right. Now it says you can use hot reload with most .NET 6 or later apps with or without debugging. Again, it's probably a fantastic feature. I don't use it. All right. I would never expect you. I wouldn't put it on a test or anything else for you. Break as they're particularly useful in the cause of log errors. I already showed from the breakpoints window. I'll let you take a look at that. All right. You can filter, you can do a lot of stuff with breakpoints. Breakpoints are fantastic when you're trying to figure out why something isn't working. The biggest thing I've always had to tell people, though, is to make sure that when you use a breakpoint, hey, I had an error on line 156, so I put a breakpoint there. No, put it on line 157. Don't put it on the line that is giving you grief, because the breakpoint stops the run before the line upon which it's set actually executes. All right. I use the gutter thing. You can also hit the F9 key. All right. I showed you how to remove it. If you've got a bunch of them, you can do a debug delete all breakpoints command. There's the disable one. That's what I was looking for. So the third bullet point down there, to disable all your breakpoints, you can do a debug disable all breakpoints, and then you can re-enable them if you need to. All right. Now, as it says, you can set a breakpoint only on a line with an executable statement. Already said that. When Visual Studio encounters the breakpoint, it enters break mode before it executes the statement. Right. It says the current breakpoints are displayed in the breakpoints window. If it's not showing on the screen, you can do a debug Windows breakpoints command. It says if you point to a breakpoint in the margin indicator, two links appear. The first one lets you display the breakpoint settings window. The second one lets you disable or enable that breakpoint. All right. Once you're in break mode, rather, as it says, there are a variety of commands that you can use to control the execution of your app. Some of these we have looked at, some of these we have not looked at. So let's take a look at everything that's here on page 355. If you're in break mode and you click the F5 key or that green triangle, it'll just get you out of break mode and continue running the program. Okay. If you click the blue thing that's up there, as it says, it'll suspend the execution of your app. You can also do a Control Alt break. If you want to stop debugging, you click the red square. Then notice there's a restart. There is a show next statement. There is a step into and a step over and a step out. Let's talk about the difference between those three. The step into, I've already shown you. Executes a statement at a time. All right. The step over, typically, if you call a module, it'll act as though it's one line of code. All right. That's stepping over the module. And stepping out, as it says, will execute the remaining lines of code in the current method. Let me tell you why that one's important. Let's imagine that you've got a for loop that is going through something 100 times. So, and if you're hitting the F11, it's going to be in that loop 100 times. But if you click the step out, all right, then if you've gone through it 3 times, it'll go through it the other 97 and boom, get you out. All right. As mentioned here, there are also a couple commands in the code editor shortcut menu. Run to cursor, that's kind of a neat one. Execute the app until it reaches the statement that contains the insertion point. In other words, if my program has 600 lines in it, and I put my cursor on line 408, and it's got some kind of a statement on it, and I choose the run to cursor, it'll keep running until it gets to line 408. If that line is executed, it'll stop right there. Set next statement, as it says, sets the next statement that you want to have run, basically. All right. Now, I've never mentioned this to you before, but it just kind of hit me, so I'm going to show it to you. And that is when you are in Visual for some reason, my internet's starting to go down again. But this right here is your toolbar, not your toolbox. That's what's down here, your toolbar. There are more toolbars than the ones that are mentioned here. If you go to an empty area in your toolbar area and you right mouse click, it shows you all the other things that are available. And you'll notice one of them is debug. So if you click here, it adds some stuff in here. It added some stuff to my toolbar that I can now use. All right. And since we're debugging now, you might want to do that. All right. This is just a rehash of what I mentioned to you, so I don't want to read this again to you. Okay. All right. The most of the last part of the chapter here is going to come in, and as you can see, it's going to talk about the different debugging windows that you have available to you. All right. As it says, these windows include the locals window, the autos window, the watch window, the immediate window, and the output window. All right. So if I come into here, we'll grab that one. That's fine. All right. And you saw this example before. All right. But if I come through here and I do put another mistake in here. Okay, boom. This is my output window right here. Right now, the only thing the output window has in it, all right, is the error listing. Okay, but there's other things that can be put in here as well. So there's a watch window and there's a locals window. First, let's talk about the difference between these. All right. The locals window gives you, excuse me, gives you information about variables. So does the watch window. The difference is the locals window, if you are running a method, it only gives you access to the variables in that method, whether they were passed into the method or whether they were declared and assigned in that method. The watch window, you can put a watch on any variable and you can look at its value while the program is running, regardless of where you are. So as the author says here, if you need to see the value of several used in the same area of an app, you can do it using the locals window. By default, as it says, this window is displayed in the group of windows in the lower left corner. What does that mean? That means that really when you look in here, all right, if I start closing these, all right, in that case, there was nothing else in there. But, oops, sorry. Sometimes when you run this stuff, sometimes, all right, you go in here and you start looking at it, etc. Notice, there's a locals window, there's a call stack window. All right, so you can come into this locals window and you're basically able to add things to it. So let's take a look. So again, as previously mentioned, the locals window displays information about the variables that are within the current scope. All right. When a variable contains other variables, all right, as it says there, the locals window displays a little arrow next to it. That means you can drill down. What does that mean? Well, I mean, it's like if you had an array and you wanted to see the different values in the array, something like that. By default, as it says, Visual Studio displays this stuff in here alphabetically. And it says, unfortunately, these groups of properties can be long and it can take a while to find the one you're looking for, but you can do some pinning and the like. I'll let you read that. I've had my share of problems doing that. All right. If you want to limit the number of variables that are displayed, you can use the autos window instead of the locals window. All right, as it says, it's similar, but it only displays information about the variables that you are currently using in the statement that just ran and in the statement that you're on right now. So it doesn't display as many variables, but it gives you, for lack of better words, totally up-to-date information as far as where you currently are. So here's an example where they have set something up with a locals window, and you can see the stuff that comes up in here. So to display this, as it says, you can click on the locals tab, or you can do a debug Windows locals. Again, the idea behind the locals is it'll show you with whatever routine you're currently in, you can use it to drill down and show you information about the in that current routine. Again, you see that on one of these here, it's got the arrow. So if you click on that arrow, it'll let you drill down even more. All right. The autos window then on the bottom of the page here works like the locals window, but again, only gives you information about the current statement that you're on and the one that ran right before that. All right. So to display that, as it says, you want to use debug Windows autos command. All right. By default, really, these things try to kind of occupy the same area. The locals window rather, the watch window etc. All right, and the auto window, they all operate in the same area. It says you can use these windows to view the value of watch expressions. And again, a watch is designed for you to be able to put a watch on a variable, run the program, and then down in the watch window as the program's running, you can see the value of that variable. So if you're in a certain routine and you think it should have a certain value, but it doesn't, all right, but it doesn't, then you can go in there and at least attempt to figure out why. Now it says if the watch window is not available when you enter break mode, you can display it by pulling down the debug menu and selecting the watch submenu. All right. To add the watch expression, as mentioned here, click in the name column of an empty row and enter that expression. So if I want to be watching, I don't know, a variable that's called total payroll, I can do that. And while the program's running, then it'll keep doing that. It can be any expression recognized by the debugger, including lambda, which we'll talk about later. So there's the watch window right in here. And again, I mean, I know I sound in many ways like a broken record, but that said, all right, sometimes the best way to figure out how to do this stuff is to just bring up a project, all right, and play with it. All right, set a bunch of this stuff. Now, the immediate window is a little bit of a different animal. What do I mean by that? All right, you can actually go stuff out, figure out the value of variables. You can do math in there, all right, etc. So there's a bunch of stuff that you can do in there. Is it showing in here? No, it's not. Can we bring it up from debug? Oh, let's see if they say in the book here how to bring that up. Let's see what they got here. This is the immediate window over here. All right, it says you can use debug Windows immediate command. So let's do that. So a bunch of the stuff that you can do is under debug and then Windows. Okay, there's another way, whoops, debug Windows that you can set breakpoints. Okay, but I'm going to bring up immediate right here. Now, I believe, unless they've changed it, and I don't think so, that you have to preface everything you're going to type in here with a question mark. So notice if I type in here a question mark, it's kind of hard to see. I can't make this any bigger, but I'm just going to put in here 56 times 12. Don't ask me why, I'm just putting that in there. And it comes back and it says 672. So I can do that. I can actually do some math in here. Again, I don't know why I'd want to, but I can do a question mark and I can put in here a string that says the time is now. Hit enter and I get that. The time is now. All right. I don't remember. Let's see if I do a question mark prod. So I'm going to do a question mark. I don't even know where I am in here. It's kind of hard to see. So there we go. Question mark prod. All right. Now it's giving me errors. Why? Because the program hasn't run yet. So it didn't know what to do. So it put the question mark right there, which of course isn't what I want to have happen. Now, this window is just nice if the program's running and you want to be able to check some stuff out. So notice what they put in here. All right, the program is running and you've stopped at a certain point. So they're printing out here the value of a text box. All right, of a few text boxes. Okay, so you can do things. All right, it says you can use the intermediate window to display and assign values from an app during the execution. To display a value, you enter the question mark. That's what I showed you. To assign a different value, you enter an assignment statement, then press the enter key. So if you realized in here, let's assume we've done some math in here, and we wanted to say C equals A divided by B, but we said C equals B divided by A. You could make a change in the immediate window to make sure it's working the way you want. All right. I believe that if you do that, the system will prompt you, if you don't save automatically, that by the time you try to get done with the program, it will say, hey, you made changes. Do you want to save them? And you can. All right. How to use the output window to review project information. This becomes important, and we have not really talked about this, but when you look here and we go here, it doesn't matter what, I could have picked either one of these. We're used to doing this, okay? Where we come in and we run the program, okay? But sometimes you don't want to run the program. You just want to see if you tried to run the program, would it work or not? All right, I want to say that again. We don't want to run the program. We just want to see if the program would run or not. So we should be able to go to build solution. All right, right there. And then what you're going to see, typically, we've already built it, but what you'll see in here is a whole bunch of stuff. This is our error list. So let's see if we did it again. I know I'm not doing a great job of showing you this, but really in the build solution window, it'll show you in there, all right, the steps that it's going through behind the scenes, kind of a lot of the system commands and stuff that it's running. All right. That's not as important in here, but when you get in the AWD1100 class, all right, then it becomes important because with some of the stuff that we do from a command line, you'll be able to see exactly what's going on in there and whether or not it worked the way you expected it to work, etc. So this is typically output window command type of stuff, that and this. So they mention here, after a solution finishes running, you can use the output window to view the debug output. As it says, it lists the files that were loaded and used by the product and a bunch of systems information. To display this, okay, debug Windows output command, everything's from debug Windows. So if I go to debug Windows output, there it is. That's what happened when I came in here and did a build solution. So it's rebuilding it. All right. And it's telling me that there are no, that it succeeded, etc. Again, this will become more important as you get into some of the later classes. Again, it just seems like around 11:15 every day my internet goes squirrely for a few minutes. I don't know why. And now this is stopped. So let me get this back up. Okay. All right. How to write data to an output window. This is a little bit different. You can actually write debug statements in your program. All right. And what'll happen is when you write this, literally, it'll write stuff right to the program itself. And I believe, let's see, it says you can use the right methods of the debug class to write data to the output window. This can be the execution of an app or for documenting changes. I don't know if I've ever used that, to be honest with you. All right, couple more things that are in here. We're just about finished with the chapter. But next, as they mention here, how to use the visualizer to use strings and collections. All right. As it says, you can use a feature called the visualizer that can display the value of a string or a collection in a way that's easy for you to visualize. All right. And again, what it's doing is it's taking what's in here, and in here, it's grabbing this stuff from the autos window and it's putting it into a tabular format that would make a little bit more sense to you. All right. So as it says, you can click the magnifying glass icon to the right of the value and select the appropriate visualizer. Okay, that's what they've done right here. Grab the value they wanted, they right mouse clicked, came up with visualizer, and they chose the one they wanted. And that's it. Now, back for a second, let's see. Tomorrow, we will be going over chapter 10. Let's just have a very quick overview of what we're going to be talking about in there. All right. I'm jumping ahead. Yeah, well, that's what I want to show you. We're going to talk about the controls that you see on the screen right here. Radio buttons. Those two radio buttons are in a group box. There is a list box. There is a check box. There is a combo box. Those are the 5 major controls. In fact, I'm going to go and build this, all right, and right before your eyes, so to speak, tomorrow, and then we're going to go through the stuff that they talk about in here. All right. So we'll do that first. We'll talk about those types of controls, as it says, how to work with combo boxes and list boxes, how to work with check boxes and radio buttons, how to work with group boxes. Then next on 3.6 or 3.12 rather, is how to use the tab order. Well, we already have gone over that. The view tab order. All right, we've already done that. How to get information about using a control. Again, I can't show you that, but if you go out to here and let's say that I go back into design mode, if for some reason I'm really confused and I don't understand what I stand in here is a button. Okay, I can click on the button and then on my function keys up on the top of the screen, I can click the F1 key. Again, that doesn't work right with what I've got loaded on my machine, but that's supposed to bring up help, online help that you can get about buttons, for example. It's as though you went out to learn.microsoft.com. All right, so we're going to do that. We're going to look at that example. We'll build it, but we won't put in any code. Then we're going to go to multi-form projects. And I'm very simply going to show you this, and everything I do tomorrow, as always, I will give you an example of, but I'm going to show you this. It's simple, yet it's all right. This will be the first time when we run this that we will have multiple forms. Here's a form main. If I click red, form red. If I click white, I'm in form white. If I click blue, I'm in form blue. So we will learn how to iterate or go between different forms. If I want to go back to my home, all right, I can exit from any one of these, etc. So we'll talk about that then, using multiple forms in a project. All right. Then we're not going to spend much time, it's only a few pages, but talking about the message box. Why? Because we've already talked about the message box. All right. Finally, we'll go back and we'll add the code to that payment app. Right there. We'll add the code to make it work. All right. We may add a little bit of code before that. We'll see. All right. Once we get done with that, and I don't know how long that will take, let's assume about as long as it took today. So about 3.5 hours. I think that's too long. I think 2.5 would be better, but we'll see. Then we will go back and we will take a look. These are going to be the 5 problems you have to do: 9-1, 9-2, 10-1, 10-2, 10-3. All right, so this is 9-1. In this exercise, you'll add code that calculates the number of nights somebody is staying at a resort. All right, the total price and the average price. Don't worry if you don't get what that means. Talk about it tomorrow. Then we'll go on and we'll work with strings. And then if you put this in right here, all right, and you put this, so if this is your input right here, and you click the format, all right, we will learn how to go and combine all that stuff together. And we will also learn how to break something apart. All right, then finally in 10-1 says we'll add code. This is going to be a length converter, but we're going to put our own little spin on it. Again, I'll explain that to you tomorrow. This one for sure, my guess is we'll do 10-1 as a class. I like to have students do this one, and some of them struggle with it. That's not why I like to have you do it. But you're building something here. When you look, we've got one group box here with 3 radio buttons in it, another group box with 3 check boxes in it, another group box with 3 labels and 3 text boxes and 2 buttons. All right. And then finally in 10-3, you go in and you set it up so you can have a separate form to work with this. That's probably 10-1 we'll do as a class, and probably 10-2 and 10-3 I will assign you. All right. That's pretty much it. Again, what I am going to do right now, once I let you go, is produce this. All right. And I will let you know where out there, where the what the name of the GitHub repo will be with those payment programs on it. That said, and I don't know if I put it out there or not already, but boy, there's a few errors in here. I'm going to try to clean up those errors before I go out and repost that. All right. So that's what I have for today. And lastly, again, I said this when we started today, but if you weren't here at the beginning or didn't hear this, you should all have gotten an email this morning that looks like this. And there you go, if you have to get the pictures or not. All right, so you all should have gotten this email today. This is the YouTube video in which I went back and redid the entire Hot 3. All right. It is private. It is 2 hours about and 10 minutes approximately. And I start from an empty screen, build the first one, copy the interface to the second one, then build the second one. And we will go over a few of the All right, we will go over chapter 10 and a few problems. And then on Wednesday, I will send you the pretest by 7 a.m., go over it from 8 till 8:15. The rest of Wednesday will be or until about 10 o'clock. I'll let you work on it. Then at 10 o'clock, I'll write it for you from scratch and I'll save it out there. Thursday will be a lab day. So if anybody's behind, hopefully they'll give you a chance to catch up. All right. And then next week, Monday, what I'm looking at is next week, Monday, giving you your next test. We'll see how that works when we get to the end of the week. All right. Again, that's all I have. Thanks for sticking around. I'll talk to you tomorrow at 8 o'clock.